The desert had a way of swallowing sound. Even gunfire seemed to vanish into the endless tan horizon, as if the land itself refused to remember violence. But Lieutenant Marcus Hale would remember this place for the rest of his life, if he lived long enough to remember anything at all. The SEALs had been inserted just before dawn, dropped into a dry wadi that intelligence claimed was low risk. That lie had already cost them 2 men. Marcus pressed his back against a shattered concrete wall, his breath shallow, his rifle heavy in his hands. Dust clung to his eyelashes. Sweat burned his eyes. His radio hissed with static and broken voices, fragments of panic, clipped commands, prayers whispered without shame. Eagle 1, this is Reaper Actual, Marcus said into the mic, keeping his voice calm even as his heart tried to hammer its way out of his chest. We are pinned. Multiple technicals. Heavy machine guns. We need air support. Now. Only silence answered him. He knew why. There was a no-fly order over this sector. High-level politics. Diplomatic talks. A red line drawn on a map by people who would never bleed here. The enemy didn't care about red lines. The first RPG slammed into the building across the street, tearing it apart like wet cardboard. Shrapnel screamed through the air. One of Marcus's men, Petty Officer Lucas Trent, went down hard, blood already soaking into the sand beneath him. Doc, someone shouted, but their corpsman was already wounded, crawling, dragging his leg behind him, teeth clenched as rounds snapped overhead. Marcus risked a glance down the street. 3 pickup trucks mounted with heavy weapons. At least 20 fighters moving with confidence. They knew the SEALs were trapped. They were taking their time. This wasn't a firefight anymore. It was an execution waiting to happen. Eagle 1, Reaper Actual, Marcus said again, his voice tighter now. If you can hear me, please. Static. Marcus slammed his fist into the dirt. Above them, the sky was a flawless blue. Empty. Indifferent. Hundreds of miles away, at a forward airbase carved into rock and concrete, Captain Evelyn Ghost Rourke sat strapped into the cockpit of her 10 Thunderbolt II. She hated waiting. The warthog was old, scarred, ugly, and perfect. Built not to impress, but to kill tanks and save lives. It smelled like oil, metal, and history. Evelyn ran a gloved hand over the throttle, eyes scanning her instruments out of habit. Her call sign wasn't official. The men on the ground had given it to her, Ghost, because when things went bad, really bad, she showed up when no one else did. She had already flown 3 missions that day. Her aircraft bore fresh scorch marks. Her body ached. Her mind refused to slow. Then the radio crackled. Reaper Actual pinned, heavy fire. Evelyn froze. The transmission was weak, half drowned by interference, but she recognized the desperation immediately. She leaned forward, adjusting her headset. Need air support. A voice came through on another channel, sharp and immediate. Negative, Ghost 1. Stand down. That sector is restricted. Repeat. No-fly order is in effect. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She switched frequencies again, fingers moving fast. Say again, ground unit, she said softly, knowing she wasn't supposed to be listening. Taking casualties, outnumbered, her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Evelyn knew that voice type. Calm on the surface. Cracking underneath, SEALs. She looked at the tactical display. The coordinates blinked red, inside the restricted zone. Command, she said, forcing her tone neutral, confirm ground presence at Grid 7 Bravo. There was a pause. Too long. Ghost 1, the controller finally replied, those units are not authorized for CS in that area. Maintain holding pattern. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She thought of the first time she'd heard that gun. The GU-8 Avenger, fire beneath her. The way the recoil shook the entire aircraft. The way the enemy scattered. The way friendly voices on the radio changed from terror to relief in seconds. She thought of the names etched in her memory. Men who didn't make it because help came too late. Evelyn toggled her mic off. She whispered to herself, not today. She pushed the throttle forward. The A-10 roared. Ghost 1, what are you doing? The controller snapped. Evelyn didn't answer. She rolled toward the horizon, the desert rising to meet her. On the ground, Marcus was running out of options. Ammo was low. Blood loss was high. Hope was nearly gone. Another RPG hit close, too close. The blast threw him sideways. His ears rang. He tasted copper. Through the ringing, he heard something else, at a sound that didn't belong, that a distant growl. He lifted his head, a T first. He thought it was imagination. Then it grew louder, deeper, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. A scream of engines. Someone laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. No way, Trent whispered through clenched teeth, bleeding but alive. No way. The sound became unmistakable. BRRRT. The world exploded. The street where the enemy trucks sat vanished in a storm of fire and shredded metal. The A-10 tore across the sky impossibly low, its cannon ripping through steel and flesh alike. The enemy never even had time to run. Marcus stared upward as the warthog banked hard, flares spitting from its wings, sunlight flashing off its battered fuselage. Over the radio, a calm female voice cut through the chaos. "Reaper actual," she said. "Ghost is on station. Mark your targets." Marcus swallowed. "Ghost," he breathed. "You're not supposed to be here." There was a pause. Then, "Yeah," she replied. "I know." The second pass obliterated the remaining fighters. The third silenced the machine gun nest that had been tearing them apart for nearly an hour. When it was over, the desert was quiet again, but it felt different now. Alive. Marcus leaned back against the wall, shaking. He pressed his forehead to the dirt. "Ghost," he said, voice breaking despite himself. "You just saved our lives." Her answer came softer. "That's the job." If you're watching this story on her battlefield legacy, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel. These are the stories of courage, sacrifice, and the moments history almost lost. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Because this story isn't over yet. Part TW, the aftermath didn't feel real. That medevac helicopters thundered in as smoke drifted lazily over the ruined street. The SEALs moved like ghosts themselves, silent, efficient, exhausted beyond words. Marcus sat on the edge of a stretcher, watching medics work on his men, his hands still trembling now that the adrenaline had drained away. Above them, the A-10 circled once more. Then it was gone. Back at the airbase, Evelyn shut down her engines and climbed out of the cockpit, knowing exactly what awaited her. The colonel didn't waste time. "You violated a direct order," he said, voice like stone. "You crossed into restricted airspace. You risked an international incident." Evelyn stood at attention, helmet under her arm. "Yes, sir." "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" She met his eyes. "Yes, sir." Ground forces were under heavy fire. Immediate CAS was required. Delay would have resulted in multiple fatalities. The room was silent. The colonel exhaled slowly. "You saved them," he said at last. "Not a question." "Yes, sir." Another pause. "Get out of my office." She turned and left, not knowing whether she'd be grounded, court-martialed, or quietly erased. 3 days later, Marcus stood in a different desert. This one quiet, controlled, lined with flags snapping in the wind. Evelyn approached, unsure why she'd been summoned. Marcus saluted her, then did something unexpected. He hugged her hard. "I owe you my life," he said, voice thick. "All of us do." She swallowed. "I'd do it again." He smiled. "I know." They never made it official. No myths, no press releases. Just a quiet acknowledgement passed between those who were there. But among the SEALs, the story spread. About the day they were left for dead, and the ghost who broke the rules to bring them home.
The silence that followed did not mean peace. It never did. Marcus learned that in the weeks after the mission, when the adrenaline faded and the weight of survival settled into his bones, nights became harder than firefights. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the echo of gunfire that no longer existed and the distant growl of an engine that felt more like memory than sound. He replayed it all again and again. The moment they realized they were boxed in, the sickening clarity that help was not coming, and then that impossible sound ripping through the sky like a promise the world had forgotten how to make. Every man in his team carried that moment differently. One laughed too much. Another grew quiet. One asked to redeploy almost immediately, as if distance might outrun fear. But all of them spoke her name the same way that ghost in O rank. No Sernam, just ghost. They weren't supposed to talk about it. Officially, the incident barely existed. Reports were sanitized. Maps were redrawn. Language was softened. Unexpected engagement. Rapid resolution. The no-fly order remained intact on paper, unbroken, untarnished. But reality doesn't live on paper. Reality lived in the scar across Trent's ribs where shrapnel nearly ended him. Reality lived in the way the corpseman's hand shook when he lit a cigarette for the first time since quitting. Reality lived in Marcus's chest, where gratitude and rage coexisted in equal measure that he requested a meeting. Not through official channels. Not with brass. He asked around quietly, carefully, until someone finally nodded and said, "Tomorrow. Hangar 3. Don't be late." Hangar 3 smelled like fuel and dust and old victories. The A-10 sat inside like a patient predator, paint chipped, nose scarred, teeth of the cannon visible even at rest. Marcus stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure what to say. Evelyn was already there, crouched near the landing gear, checking something with a wrench in hand. She looked smaller on the ground, lighter somehow, like gravity didn't quite know what to do with her when she wasn't flying. "You're staring," she said without looking up. He smiled despite himself. "Just making sure you're real." She straightened, wiped her hands on a rag, and studied him with calm eyes that had seen too much to pretend otherwise. "You're the one who called for help." "Yes," he said. "I wanted to say thank you." "Properly." She nodded once. "You already did. On the radio." That wasn't enough. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The jet loomed behind her, silent and massive. "They grounded you," Marcus said finally. She shrugged. "Temporarily. For saving us. For disobeying orders." He clenched his jaw. "Those orders would have killed us." "I know," she said quietly. The simplicity of it struck him. "No anger. No bitterness. Just truth." "They'll clear you," he said, trying to sound confident. "Maybe," she replied. "Maybe not. And if they don't," a faint smile touched her lips. "Then I'll live with it. I always knew the cost." Marcus exhaled slowly. "How do you carry that?" She looked at the A-10, then back at him. By remembering the faces of the ones who walked away. He didn't trust his voice, so he nodded. Days turned into weeks. The story grew legs. Not officially, but in barracks, in whispered conversations, in nods exchanged between people who understood what it meant to be saved by someone who refused to look away. Evelyn was eventually cleared. No ceremony, no apology, just a quiet reinstatement and a new assignment far from that sector. The message was clear. She could fly, but she was being watched. She didn't care on her next mission. When the radio crackled with panic from a unit that wasn't supposed to be there, she didn't hesitate. Neither did the men who heard her voice. "Ghost is inbound." Those 4 words became a lifeline. Not a guarantee, not a miracle, but hope arriving at 900 rounds per minute. Marcus returned home months later, changed in ways he couldn't fully explain. When people thanked him for his service, he nodded politely, knowing the truth was heavier than gratitude. He kept a photo on his desk, not of his team, not a flag, but of an A-10 cutting across a desert sky, low and defiant, frozen in a moment when rules bent to humanity. Sometimes he imagined someone watching this story now, somewhere far away, maybe on a phone, maybe late at night, maybe looking for proof that courage still exists. That if that's you, remember this. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear flight helmets. Sometimes they break orders. And sometimes they save lives simply because they refuse to let good people die alone. That if you're watching this on our battlefield legacy, subscribe to the channel. These stories matter. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because every place, every voice keeps the memory alive.